Alright, so today what I wanted to do was talk about Resident Evil 4 Remake, kind of in the same vein as the video yesterday on Shadows of Rose, kind of go over what we do know, my own personal thoughts, as well as the thoughts of the community as a whole at the moment. I think with Resident Evil 4, at the moment at least, it's a bit of a mixed reception, but we'll get into what that is in a moment. Without any further ado, let's just jump into it. So let's start with what we do know of Resident Evil 4. So Resident Evil 4 Remake is a complete new reimagining of the story of Resident Evil 4. It takes a bit more of a darker, more serious tone, rather than what we currently know. Resident Evil 4, as it is at the moment, is still kind of serious, but the characters, the story, what happens in the game takes itself a little less seriously, and kind of rolls with it throughout the game. But with this one, they kind of want to make it more of a horror-focused game, with a more serious tone, and you can kind of tell that that's definitely what they're doing already with the trailer that we've seen, as well as the brief gameplay snippets we've seen as well. Personally, I like that direction. I like the game having a more serious vibe and the stakes being a bit higher probably, as well as there being more of a horror element with it. At the same time, I really like how 4 is at the moment. Like, it's a fun game to play. There is moments where it's tense, there's moments where it's more serious than others, and at moments it's just really funny. And that's probably why people like the game so much and why it's so memorable, because it shifts tone so well throughout the game that there's moments where you feel a bit more relaxed, and there's moments where it's more tense, and there's moments where you kind of enjoy the story and what's being said and the dialogue between characters and such. It all fits together really well, and to change that completely with a remake being more serious and more horror focused, people are going to be concerned, but I personally prefer it being a more serious horror game than what it is at the moment, but we'll wait and see what they do. I'm sure there will still be some iconic moments from the original in the remake. For example, the opening sequence with the village, I'd imagine that will still be there basically as it was before. Salazar is an interesting one, that whole castle area. That's where the game, for me, goes a bit overboard and a bit silly, but it's fun, so I wonder what they'll do with that. And then one thing I still want to see in the game is the knife fight with Krauser, or obviously it is a quick time event cutscene in the original, so whether they make it an actual fight or just a cinematic, we'll have to wait and see. But hopefully that still stays as it is, because that was really cool. The castle, for me, I'm looking at the game now, the castle section of the game is where I feel like most changes will happen, personally. Of course, there's other parts of the game that could change as well. I'm not specifically sure of what they'll change and how they'll change it, but if it's trying to fit a more serious tone, there are certain parts you can pick out and go, okay, how will they change this bit, or how will they change that bit, or will they keep that bit the same? Like, there's plenty of parts of the game, as we have at the moment, that could easily change. But like I said, from me and my standpoint, I do feel like the castle will have the most significant changes over the whole entire rest of the game, because the village section and the industrial section on the island at the end kind of play really well, and I think they're kind of fine. But it's just some of the things that happen in the castle are a bit weird, and there's reasons behind it. Obviously, with Resident Evil 4 kind of already planned to have been a Devil May Cry game and then changed to a Resident Evil game. You can see that very much so in the castle section of the game. So yeah, that's where I thought most changes in the remake will come from. So in terms of that side of things, with how people feel with the remake at the moment, I feel like a lot of people are kind of thinking that the tonal shift of the game will ruin the game. And straight out the gate, I want to say, the remake existing and coming out doesn't mean the original disappears. It's still there, you can still play it. Yes, there'll be a more modernized version of the game, but I don't understand why. This is with any remake of any game. A lot of people seem to just think that the original doesn't matter anymore, but it's still there. If you prefer the original, you can play the original. It's not disappearing when the remake releases. You'll just have a preference. Like, you can either play the more serious, more horror-focused remake, or the classic original. There is a choice for you there. So that's where I sit on that one. If there's a preference to enjoy the original, that's fine. If you end up enjoying the remake more, then that's fine too. Just let people enjoy what they want to enjoy, and it's as simple as that, really. So let's jump over to the gameplay aspect of Resident Evil 4 Remake. As we know, it is going to be in third person again, over the shoulder, like the original. There is some idea going around at the moment that because Village now has the option to play in first or third, that 4 will have the option to play in third or first. Again, mainly probably because a lot of the newer audience to the series kind of played 7 and 8, and enjoy the first person perspective. I know a lot of people out there that don't like it and don't think a Resident Evil game should be in first person, but a lot of newer fans do prefer the first person perspective of 7 and 8. So again, I guess it's giving people that choice to play in the perspective of their choosing, and let's not forget that there is VR content coming out for 4 Remake as well. So it's possible that the perspectives will be optional, but I would probably prefer to play in third person as well. I do like first person 7 and 8, I think it's really good, but I would prefer the game in third person personally. Continuing with the gameplay, I'm sure that the attach case will still be your inventory management. One thing I think will change probably drastically is the amount of QuickTime events in Resident Evil 4 at the moment in the remake. QuickTime events were kind of a thing of the time, especially when that game came out. A lot of games had QuickTime events in, some way more than others, but I think with 4 they were spaced out enough and they fit where they were coming up. They made sense to be there, like running away from the boulders or dodging certain attacks from bigger enemies, and then the Krauser fight in the cutscene as well. But it begs the question, will they remain, or will it be more of a manual encounter, like where you actually have to run from his boulders yourself, or you actually have to fight Krauser yourself rather than being a cutscene? We don't know. But QuickTime events aren't really in many games now, so it's interesting to see what they'll do with that. Another thing with Resident Evil 4 Remake is the content in the game. Obviously you've got the normal campaign, which will probably be mostly intact with certain changes probably, and then you've got your DLC, okay? So you've got your Mercenaries mode, which has a wide amount of characters in it. You've got Leon, Krauser are playable, Hunk is playable, Wesker is playable, a lot of different options for your characters, and I'm hoping that Mercenaries stays in the game. You've also got your Assignment Ada and Separate Ways campaign. Assignment Ada is more of an extra mode, and I'd imagine that would probably stay as it is. But with Separate Ways, it is essentially a kind of separate campaign. There's an idea going around at the moment that the Separate Ways campaign will actually be integrated into the main game, and throughout certain parts of the game, you'll kind of transition from playing as Leon to Ada and back again, and also adding in more playable sections with Ashley as well. She already has a section that's playable in the original Resident Evil 4, but it does make sense to probably have her playable again in probably some different terms as well. One idea people have is there are certain parts of the game where Leon and Ashley are split up, and maybe you have the option to either do her part of it or his part of it, and that's a good idea, I guess, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But in terms of content additional to the campaign, I think most of it will probably be there at launch. Mercenaries, I'm not too sure what they'll do with that. Hopefully it stays mostly intact. Assignment Ada as well will probably remain as it is. And obviously you've got your Separate Ways campaign as well. I wouldn't mind if it was integrated into the single player campaign as additional content, or as a separate campaign like it is now. Either way, as long as it's still there, I'm pretty happy. But in terms of any other information we have for the game, that's about it at the moment. A lot of it is kind of scarce details on the tone of the game, the gameplay of the game, and obviously snippets of the story being slightly different. Most of what people are saying is kind of ideas and what people want to see. Some of them make sense, some of them not so much personally, but everyone's excited to see the game. Like I've said a million times before in previous videos talking about 4 Remake up to its announcement, this game has some pretty high stakes in terms of making it good and making it kind of a good remake, basically, especially after backlash of Resident Evil 3. Something to keep in mind with the 4 Remake is basically the entire team that worked on 2 Remake working on this one. Obviously with 3 Remake, a lot of it was outsourced to a different studio, and that's probably why there was a bit more backlash and to cut content and stuff like that. But this one is basically being made in-house by Capcom exclusively. And again, I think they're aware of the stakes on this one because it is held up not only as the best Resident Evil game by a lot of people, but one of the best games ever. So pressure's on to make it as good as it can be and as close to the original as possible, while still changing it and making it fresh for newer audiences and fitting the kind of tone of the overall series. It does beg the question about 5 and 6 in terms of remaking those, because they obviously want to take 4 down the horror road now as well, and 5 and 6 are still standouts from that, so they're a bit more action focused. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if 5 and 6 get the same treatment, but that's going to be a way down the line for now. But as always, let me know your thoughts on Resident Evil 4 Remake down below. Do you think it looks good so far? Are you not really interested? Are you kind of preferring the original at the moment? Or are you more excited for the newer version of the game? It's always interesting to see what people think about the current situation with RE4, because again, there is a mixed reception at the moment, so we'll wait and see what happens over time when they show more and talk about it more. I would imagine they'll probably talk about it more at Tokyo Game Show, which I believe is in September, October kind of time, which is kind of around the time that the Village DLC and stuff comes out as well. So until then, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all tomorrow when we're going to talk about Reverse and go over that and how it's been announced with a release date, and we'll recap the game and stuff like that. So I'll see you all then.